Science Podcast. My name is Tyler Bublitz, and welcome to the 450th special episode. It's a little mind-boggling for me to even be saying that number. I like these episodes because, one, it means that we've met a milestone, either a birthday or an every 50 to 100 episode milestone. But it also, for me, it just kind of continues to put in reality what goes on a week-in, week-out basis. And it forces me to slow down, to look at things, to actually look at more of the numbers and what's actually all going on and try to gather some of my thoughts. And it allows me to talk a little bit more off the cuff, even more than I typically do in the podcast. So I really enjoy these podcasts, and I hope you guys do as well. And we have a few different things that have happened here since the last time we've talked, and I feel like we need to talk about them a little bit. And I'm excited, and so let's just jump into it. I will say, I feel like 2026 is going to definitely be the year where we have gone the most international than we've ever have. So as of recording this, and I'm recording this on the 10th of August, 2026, we have reached 118 countries this year. We have over 13,700 listens, which by far is the most listens we have ever had in a year. In fact, the month of July for 2026 was within about 150 listens of the amount we had for all of 2024. So it's been very, very surreal, very crazy, just with how much things have been going on. And is there other factors to that? I'm not entirely sure. We'll get into a few things that maybe are contributing a little bit. But it's still really cool to see that it's at least being heard and the IP addresses are coming back from these different countries. So that's fascinating to me. So let's just also give you kind of a quick rundown of a few things from my back end that's kind of neat. If you want to look at the top 5 countries that have listened to the podcast this year, first, number 1 is the United States. I'm in the United States, so that makes a lot of sense. Number 2 is a surprise to me, is Singapore, with over 3,000 downloads from Singapore. So to my Singapore listeners, welcome. I'm glad to have you here. Number 3 is Canada with a little over 1,850. Then to Vietnam and Japan. There's kind of a big drop off between Vietnam and Japan again. So Vietnam a little over 800, and Japan we're sitting about 325. So that, to me, it's really cool that we've been able to reach all over the world. We're seeing that. And even here in the United States, I'm a little surprised because our most listened to state is California. And I'm not in California. Number 2 is Minnesota. That's where I'm living currently. And then Virginia, Colorado, and Georgia to round out the top 5, which, again, I feel is really kind of cool because it's kind of all over the country. So it's been really cool to see that. And we still have a few places this year that we haven't gotten to listen to. Looking at Vermont, just doing a quick look. I know Puerto Rico hasn't this year. Hawaii hasn't this year. Wyoming hasn't this year. But every other place we seem to have at least all listen this year. So to me, that's really cool. And again, as I've kind of talked about with this podcast, the point of this is to bring and show yet again that scripture and faith and science all do not need to be separate. They are plenty of things that bring these things together. And I believe still that there needs to be more discussion and more conversation about how these play together. And I think it needs to be something that's talked about more regularly within churches in general. Now, that also means like it gets into some interesting waters, and I try navigating that. And then again, as I will talk about in a little bit, I know there's going to be times where potentially if we're building out the interview podcast, which I know I've done a few of those in the past, there might be times that I get opinions and viewpoints that are not necessarily my own, but it's also, I think it's important for us to be having these conversations. It's not necessarily a place to be, in my opinion, like pushing back hard. It's one of these places to be hearing these different viewpoints and opinions and allowing us to kind of be working on them internally. And again, I see more value in building the body of Christ together because we already are fractured enough compared to pushing back hard and getting everybody to believe where I'm at. And again, as I've kind of even been stating the last few weeks, I think there has been a lot of things where my viewpoints and stuff have evolved some. I wouldn't say they've necessarily changed, but there's been definitely things where I look at things a little bit differently, and that's part of growth. That's part of what we should be doing in the faith. So it's not necessarily right or wrong on what you're stating at this moment. It should be something that we're continuing to grow, continuing to develop. I think one of the things I also want to bring up when we're talking also a little bit about looking at how it's become a little bit more international this year. The article that I've been referencing most of the year by Isang Nadali Teddy, I really do enjoy that article, and I'd highly recommend checking that out. But one of the things that I think is really cool about Beyond the Argument Where Science and Scripture Meet, Isang Nadali Teddy is a student in Cameroon. And it was really cool for me, and I actually am meaning to reach out to him. So if he hears this, I'll be reaching out to you soon. Just having conversations across the globe. And again, I think as a church, it's a conversation. It's things that we need to be doing more. We need to be working together more and being able to see and hear and understand what is going on in different places so we can, one, recognize where God is doing these amazing things all over the globe, but also it helps bring us together, and I think actually helps unite the body better. And I think that's one of the things that we continue to need to do. One other thing that I know I've introduced kind of randomly, I think kind of starting in March, and it's had a little bit of impact here, is I introduced some additional ads that are not my own into the podcast. What I will say on it, if you get an ad that you don't think lines up with the values of what we are establishing here, or just something that doesn't fit, shoot me an email and who it was for. I can do some review on my end and kind of block different ad types. And I've tried to have it fairly general on a lot of things, and there's specific things that I've been making sure is not part of these conversations. And granted, I know that having that would actually, I do get a little bit of a kickback. It's not been a crap ton of money. I'm still not making anything from this. So this idea of just, again, having maybe where it's able to offset a few costs down the road eventually. But again, if there is something that shows up in those ads, please reach out. Please let me know. That is something that I really do want to make sure the experience of what you're able to get from these is the best that it possibly can be. So if there is something that comes up, let me know. I'd really appreciate it. Shoot an email to me. I list that in the description of all my podcasts. Reach out, get in contact. I'd really like to hear that. I also have mentioned throughout the years, I know I've done one interview podcast. I know I recorded another one earlier this year. I feel really bad I haven't gotten back to editing it. I need to edit that and see if I can get that out here within the next month or two. We'll see. There's just been a lot that has happened this year. As I kind of stated with my wife's side of the family, there was some major things that happened, some major changes that happened, and I've kind of referenced that in the podcast. And when you have that type of death, and especially again, this isn't my full-time gig. This is something that I do on the side. I still have to take care of my wife. And so it's been a lot of that. And also then for both of us trying to make sure that we're spending some intentional time with family. So there's been a few things that have been on the back burner, but I will say there's a few more people that I've specifically talked to that I want to have some interviews with. I'm really excited to have interviews with. And that is something that I'm hoping to eventually kind of roll out more. And I would love to, again, hear feedback. I love feedback. I get some, I love more, because really it helps drive on this end when it is a grind, to be honest. Every week and doing it for 450 consecutive weeks, it is a grind, but it's also, I see the fruits from it. I see the fruits within my own life and the things that I'm digging into and finding. But also hearing when it's being used in worship, hearing how it's benefiting your faith walk, answering the question of the week. Those types of things are super powerful, super helpful, and it really helps fill me up to continue to keep going. So just realize it's a kind of a communication back and forth, and I really enjoy hearing feedback, whatever feedback I get. And I just thank you for tuning in. It's one of these things where it's really amazing to see and recognize the amount of people who are taking some time out of their day to listen to what I have to say, how I'm understanding these texts, to look at, to think about these texts. So I thank you for that. It's flattering, and I just see it as a great privilege that that's happening. there is a couple thank yous I definitely want to put out there. First and foremost, my wife. She puts up with this crazy stuff. And I know a lot of this is basically a one-man operation, but I will say she is a huge part of this, that she supports this. She is able to give me the support to allow me to do this and make sure that I'm trying to take care of myself at the same time, puts up with the craziness of what I put myself through with this podcast. That's another episode for another day. But I really appreciate it, Sarah, and I would recommend just give some comments to thank my wife. It's one of the things that I just appreciate so much about her. I also will say our families, both sides, my parents and family, my sister, my nuclear family, my extended family, and same with my wife's family. There is a lot of time where I suddenly have to slip away to edit a podcast, or I'm trying to do all these things before going on a trip, get some podcasts recorded. So there is a lot of like logistics that go into it. There's been plenty of times where even last night for me, there was a moment where my wife was driving so I could edit a podcast, so I wasn't going to be up half the night trying to get that edited so I could get some good sleep. So there's things like that I really appreciate the help and support that a lot of these people give to allow for this thing to continue to happen. It's not just me by any means. And most of all, we have to thank God for this. This is so much of this is God helping to connect the dots, God connecting and making all this stuff happen. We have to recognize, for me, when I click the publish button, there is so much of this that is outside of my control. And it's one of these things that I pray about and talk to God about is just, okay, it's in your hands now. You helped me with the first part of it, and now it's really on you. So you listening to it and getting something out of it, that's you and your connection and how God is continuing to work through this. And that's one of the things that I think is so amazing with this type of medium and being able to talk about this, to think about this. And especially for me having where now there's a lot of these texts I've gone through. Now this is the third time through. So having this back catalog, it's really cool to continue to see how God speaks through and helps us acknowledge what has been going on and how God continues to be a living God and speaks through these texts, and how through multiple different science topics, we continue to see how God reiterates so many of these different promises and so many of the different characteristics of God through and through and through. And so for me, that's the powerful part of this. I know I've mentioned also just the aspect for me, there's also almost a diary aspect to it. There's certain things that I know if I go through and listen, I can tell you things of what was going on in my life, things that were going on, or certain times that there's certain messages to certain people as I'm talking about things. So there's definitely a part of me that's in these, and it's really cool to have that, but it's also recognize the majority and the main purpose is using what we know of science to be able to help nurture your faith and have God speaking to you through these. So I'm just flattered to be a vessel for that and being able to talk about this and work with this and continue to inspire and hopefully help you in your connection with God week to week and get you to dig a little bit deeper. So what I'm going to ask you is there anything that you're looking for? Is there something that I can provide? Is there some questions that you have? I'd really be interested in knowing. Shoot me an email, shoot me a DM in these different places. Again, I list all the different social media that I'm on right there in the description every week. Feel free to reach out. I'd really appreciate and kind of look forward to hearing what you have to say. Trust me, there is different things that I do based off of comments that people have given me. And there's things that if I go back to like the first podcast, I distinctly remember, and I could tell you the person that suggested, Tyler, it would be really great if you summarize some of the readings. Now that's a major part of the podcast is every week, going through those readings, going through those texts, summarizing them to at least kind of give you my vantage point of how I'm reading those texts to help guide you through what we're going to be going through. So for me, I really enjoyed that comment. It's totally influenced how the podcast has moved forward. So I'd really like and want to hear feedback. But I also want to acknowledge this is a bit of a celebration. We have made it to another milestone. The next big milestone like this is 500, which is surreal because that would also mean I'm not that far away from 10 years of doing it. And we're approaching that 9-year mark, which It's a lot of life that I've done now doing this. And there's definitely times where I think about there's certain parts of my life I don't know what it would be like without having the podcast in certain ways. So it's an adventure, that's for sure. And I'm enjoying it, and I hope you're enjoying it as well. And again, also one final question that I have for you guys. I know I mentioned it in one of the podcasts, but what is some of the podcasts that stand out to you, especially if you've been listening for a while? What are some of the different podcasts that stand out to you? I'd really be curious to hear what your thoughts are on that. Which ones stand out to you? I know there's certain ones that stand out to me. There's times when there was different like life events that I remember talking about. The first one that I feel like really stands out in my mind was, I think in about June of 18, I ended up talking about fear, and I know I brought that up recently. That was one of the first podcasts where I was like, ooh, that was really cool. And I remember that was one of the first podcasts that actually I ended up going to a service that the pastor told me it was going to be mentioned in the sermon. And at that point, 6 months of not necessarily knowing if anything was happening and being able to be in a service and recognize that that was being utilized, super cool. And it made it all the 6+ months at that point worth it for maybe 30 seconds, but it was worth it to me. And that was super awesome. And that's partially what kind of fuels to continue going with that. I know for me, one of the other ones that it really kind of stands out is right early in the pandemic. I didn't necessarily want to get into it because, again, I wanted this to be kind of a living thing, but it was probably a month and a half into when true pandemic would really taken hold, at least here in the United States. I remember talking about Semmelweis and hand washing, and it fit with where the texts were, but I just remember talking about that subject. But again, it's one of these things too, when you do 450 of these, there's different topics when they get brought up. It's like, oh yeah, I remember talking about that. But it's also one of these things too, where I keep going. And so there's a lot of times when people are like, oh, could you find the episode on that? I'll see what I can do. Sometimes it's easier said than done. So it's one of the things that, again, on the back burner, at some point I would love to figure out a better way of being able to search up different keynotes and topics and things of that nature for all the different podcasts to make it a little easier for people to find, but it's not there at this moment. So again, I'm very thankful for you listening. I'm really thankful for the feedback when I get it, and I just recommend and encourage, please, just more and more feedback. And I look forward to continuing on and continuing working with this. And again, I'm so thankful that you are willing to sit down and listen to me work through these texts and try to figure out how is God and science working together week after week after week. And I believe that we're slowly getting to a place where more and more we're being able to put those pieces together and show more and more how faith and science work together instead of in opposition. So we'll wrap this up as we always do. I pray God blesses you through your faith and amazes you through science.